The Boeing 737 cut through the night sky like a silver blade, its cabin lights dimmed, its passengers lulled into the false comfort of routine. 200 people slept, read, prayed, or stared at tiny screens, each unaware how thin the line was between flight and fall. In the cockpit, Captain Daniel Harris checked the instruments for the 100th time. 30 years of flying had taught him that most disasters didn't announce themselves with drama. They arrived quietly, politely, like a knock on the door you didn't hear until it was already open. The knock came as a chime. ENG-1 oil press low. Harris leaned forward. "You see that?" First Officer Malik nodded, already flipping through procedures, running checklist. The plane shuddered just once like a cough. Then the left engine flamed out. A warning blared, sharp and merciless. Passengers stirred. A baby cried. Somewhere a coffee cup tipped and spilled. "Engine 1 failure," Malik said, calm but tight. Harris steadied the yoke. "We're fine. Single engine landing. Declare emergency." Malik reached for the radio. "Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is Flight 718. Engine failure. Maintaining altitude." The cockpit shook again, this time harder. The second engine whined, sputtered and died, as if someone had reached out and pulled the plug on the sky itself. The lights flickered. Then came a sound no pilot ever forgot, the sound of nothing. No thrust. No hum, only the wind rushing past aluminum. Malik's voice cracked. "Captain, engine 2 is gone." Harris stared at the airspeed bleeding away. His hands felt suddenly old, heavy. "APU now." They worked fast, muscle memory taking over. Switches, valves, numbers scrolling down instead of up. Altitude 36,000, 35,200s, 34, 500s. Malik swallowed. Both engines out, dual failure. Harris pressed the transmit button. "Mayday, mayday, Flight 718, dual engine failure. We are gliding. Request immediate vectors." The radio answered after a pause that felt like a lifetime. "Flight 718, this is center. Confirmed dual engine failure?" "Confirmed," Harris said. "We need a runway." Another pause. Then the controller's voice, stripped of all hope and sugar. "Flight 718, nearest airport is beyond your glide range. You must attempt an emergency landing. If you fail," the voice hesitated, "you will lose all souls on board. 200 lives." Harris closed his eyes for half a second. In that instant, he saw faces. His wife, his son, the cadets he once trained, the passengers behind him who trusted strangers with their lives. Behind the cockpit door, panic erupted. A woman screamed. Someone shouted prayers. Flight attendants struggled to sound calm while their hands shook. The aircraft dropped another 1,000 feet. "Captain," Malik whispered, "we won't make it." Harris didn't answer. The cockpit door buzzer sounded. He ignored it. It buzzed again. "Sir," Malik said, "protocol." The door knocked. Not frantic, not desperate, controlled. Harris turned. "This is not the time." A voice answered through the door, female, steady, unafraid. "It is exactly the time." Harris hesitated, then unlocked the door. It opened to reveal a woman standing alone in the aisle. Early 30s, dark hair pulled back. No fear in her eyes, only focus. She wore a plain black jacket with no airline logo, no name tag. Passengers stared at her like she was either insane or sent by God. "This is the cockpit," Harris snapped. "Go back to your seat." She stepped inside anyway. How many aboard?" she asked. 200, Malik said before Harris could stop him. She nodded once. "Then listen carefully." Harris felt anger flare. "Ma'am, sit down." "Captain Harris," she interrupted, reading his name from the panel without looking. "You have one option left, and you don't know it." Silence filled the cockpit. Malik stared. "Who are you?" The woman met his eyes. "Someone who understands dead engines. Altitude 29,000 feet. Harris laughed bitterly. "We all understand them right now." She stepped closer, scanning the instruments with a speed that made Malik's breath catch. "Fuel contamination," she said. "Not flameout. You still have power, just not where you're looking." Harris blinked. "That's impossible." She reached forward and flipped a switch Harris hadn't touched since simulator training 15 years ago. The auxiliary power unit whined to life. Electricity surged. The screen stabilized. The plane stopped shaking, just enough. Who taught you that?" Malik whispered. She didn't answer. Instead, she sat in the jump seat, then moved, confident, precise, into the captain's chair. Harris grabbed her arm. "You can't!" She looked at him then. Her eyes were calm, but behind them was something darker, older. "Captain," she said softly, "air traffic control just gave you a choice, land or 200 die." She placed his hand back on the yoke. "And you hesitated." Harris swallowed. "She took the controls." "Not today." Malik stared in disbelief. "Tower, we have—" The radio crackled violently. Static flooded the cockpit. Then nothing. "All comms are dead," Malik said. The woman adjusted the heading. "Good." "Good," Harris echoed. She glanced at the radar screen, now blinking erratically. "Because if they can't see us, they won't ask questions." Outside, clouds swallowed the aircraft. On radar screens miles away, Flight 718 flickered, then vanished. "Center, we lost Flight 718, a controller said. "Radar contact lost." In the cabin, passengers screamed as the plane dipped sharply. Inside the cockpit, the woman's hands never shook. "Captain," Malik said quietly, "who is she?" Harris watched the altimeter, then her, so calm, so certain. "I don't know," he admitted. The woman leaned forward, eyes fixed on the darkness ahead. "But whatever she is," Harris said, voice barely a breath, "she's the only thing standing between us and the ground." The aircraft descended into the storm, and the woman flying it had already disappeared from every system that tried to track her. The Boeing 737 fell through the storm like a wounded bird, clouds ripping past the windows, rain hammering the fuselage as if the sky itself wanted them gone. Inside the cockpit, the altimeter spun downward. 25,000, 20,800, 22,400. Captain Harris's hands were slick with sweat. He had flown through wars, hurricanes, and system failures, but never this. Never without engines, never without radio, never with a stranger flying his aircraft. The woman's eyes never left the instruments. "Glide ratio?" she asked calmly. 17-1, Malik replied automatically. "Weight?" "Too heavy?" She nodded. "Then we make it lighter." Harris snapped his head toward her. "We can't dump fuel this low." "We already are," she said, pointing. Fuel streamed out into the night, invisible but necessary. In the cabin, passengers felt the shift. A flight attendant stumbled as the aircraft banked sharply. "Ladies and gentlemen," the lead attendant announced, voice trembling but brave, "brace for emergency landing." Prayers filled the air, so did sobs. A man clutched his daughter to his chest. An elderly woman whispered names of people long gone. Some passengers stared forward in silence, already saying goodbye. Back in the cockpit, Malik stared at the navigation screen. "There's nothing," he said. "No airports, no highways, just mountains." The woman leaned closer. "Not nothing," she corrected. "Memory." She reached up and manually tuned an old emergency frequency, one that hadn't been used in years. A faint signal appeared. Harris's breath caught. "That's a restricted band." "Yes," she said, "for a reason." She adjusted the heading. 15 miles ahead, barely visible on the terrain display, lay a thin grey line. Malik's eyes widened. That's an abandoned military strip." "Closed 20 years ago," Harris said. "Runways too short, no lights, no clearance." The woman smiled faintly. "Perfect." Altitude 14,000 feet. Wind shear rocked the plane violently. An alarm screamed. "Stall warning!" Harris instinctively reached for the yoke, but she was already ahead of it, lowering the nose just enough, bleeding speed without killing lift. "How do you know this place?" Malik asked. For the first time, her voice softened. "Because I died there." Silence filled the cockpit. Harris stared at her profile. "That's not funny." "I'm not joking." Lightning flashed, illuminating her face, and something else. A scar near her temple, old, clean, military. "Black test program," she continued. "Experimental aircraft. No recovery allowed. Official. Report said I disintegrated on impact." Malik whispered, "You're supposed to be dead." "Yes?" The runway appeared ahead, dark, cracked, barely visible through rain and mist. Harris's heart sank. "We won't stop in time." "We will," she said, "or we won't stop at all." Altitude 2,000 feet. The plane shook violently as crosswinds slammed into its side. In the cabin, passengers screamed as the ground rushed closer. "Brace, brace, brace!" The woman took full control. "Flaps, manual," she ordered. Malik obeyed. "Gear down," Harris said. The landing gear dropped with a sickening delay, then locked. "Green lights." "Good," she said. At 500 feet, the runway filled the windshield. Too fast, too heavy, too short. Harris felt tears sting his eyes. "This is it," he whispered. The woman leaned forward, voice steady as stone. "Not today." She pulled the nose up at the last possible second. The wheels slammed into the runway with bone-shaking force. Metal screamed. Sparks exploded behind them like fireworks. The plane bounced once, twice. Harris thought they were going to lift off again and die in the trees beyond the strip. "Halt," she whispered, easing the nose down. The aircraft skidded sideways. Tires blew. Fire flashed, then vanished in rain. Passengers were thrown forward, screaming. Then, silence. The Boeing 737 stopped. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the cabin erupted. People cried, laughed, prayed out loud. They were alive. Harris slumped back in his seat, breath coming in broken gasps. We landed," Malik said, stunned. Emergency lights flickered on. Sirens echoed in the distance, military ones, old but still alive. Harris turned to the woman. "To whoever you are," he said, voice breaking, "thank you." The captain's seat was empty. No movement, no sound. Just an old fabric patch resting on the console. A black insignia with faded white letters. "Phantom!" Security teams stormed the aircraft minutes later. They found 2 pilots shaken alive. They found 200 passengers, walking, crying, hugging. But when they asked about the 3rd person in the cockpit, there was no 3rd pilot, the report said. No fingerprints, no DNA, no name on the manifest. Military officials arrived before sunrise. The strip was sealed, all recordings confiscated, all radar logs erased. Captain Harris was told to sign papers he wasn't allowed to read. When he refused, an officer leaned close and whispered, "Some people don't stay dead, Captain, and some debts don't get repaid only once." Years later, Harris retired. He never flew again. But sometimes, when storms rolled in and aircraft called Mayday, controllers swore they heard something strange on emergency frequencies. A calm female voice cutting through static. "Move, I've got it!" Officially, Flight 718 was saved by exceptional crew performance. Unofficially, 200 people walked away because death showed up, took the controls, and said,